Hello, and welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast. So, today we're jumping into a topic that it's a can of worms. It's a very tangled and big and mind-bending topic, and that is the topic of transcending duality and stepping into non-duality. And so there's a lot of new age, takes on what duality is, polarity, right? We see a lot and hear a lot, especially on social media, of there's the light on this planet and then there's the dark on this planet. And I've even engaged in these conversations, right? Like the light's always going to win. And there's so many interpretations of this throughout spiritual literature, throughout just conversations across the board. And part of the human matrix is duality. It's, what we see in politics, the right, the left, even men and female, you've got male and female and they're different. And you've got, good and bad and sinning versus, salvation, all these different things that put us in these categories that create separation. And part of what, when we came to this planet, it was because my understanding and interpretation of it thus far is we we agreed to a level of separation from source, and some people call that God, some people say it's the universe, others have their, Buddha, whatever else you believe. And we came here really to find our way back home. And we were talking before we were hitting record, and I was saying, I love the Ram Dass quote, we're all just walking each other home. And, I think people interpret that as we're walking each other back to the other side, like to our end of days on this planet. And I had this ping of, I wonder if that's really meant that we're walking each other back home to the truth of ourselves, right? The truth of our consciousness, our Christ like kingdom of heaven within energy. And, what really kind of kicked this off for me. So I've been on a spiritual journey. I think all of us, right? We're spiritual beings having a human experience here on this planet. So from day one, birth, we've been, exploring our consciousness, learning, evolving, having experiences, having a lot of traumas and tragedies and all these things. And all of it is with the intention to wake us up spiritually, to really remind us of who we are and begin that transcendence. And so I've been on this intentional journey, I'd say, for the last 5 or 6 years of really diving into understanding, you know, um, my own spiritual journey, deconstructing religion. I had a lot of religious trauma, like many of the people that probably listen have. I know you and I talk about that a lot. Um, it's not to say when I was very young. I mean, I was questioning the Bible when I was, I think, like 10 years old, being like, this doesn't make sense. How could an all-loving God condemn us? Like, he put us here and we're learning. How does that make sense? And then I have my own children and I'm like, that really doesn't make sense. And so for a lot of years, I was kind of questioning narratives I was being taught. But then, in recent months, really, you and I both have had a lot of challenges, a lot of significant things happening in our life that have pushed us to the brink of our own kind of levels of insanity at times. And I got into a book that you're now reading or listening to, Mind Hacking Happiness, which was recommended to me a couple years ago. And I love how this always works because I think so often we're exposed to concepts or things, but they fall into our lap when we're ready to digest them. And so I read this book and it's a phenomenal book. So if anybody's interested, it's called Mind Hacking Happiness by Sean Webb. And he speaks about kind of deconstructing the mind, right? The ego loves to create interpretations and perceptions, and that makes our emotion essentially. So it's very basic, like mindset work that I teach all of my clients. But it goes through how to begin cultivating meta awareness. So meta awareness is basically becoming the observer to your thoughts, right? Like we are not our thoughts, but we're the observer of the brain doing what the brain does. But there's a consciousness outside of that, which is the totality of who we are. And so the book basically kind of helps you learn how to separate that ego mind from your soul self. And he uses it in very practical scientific ways, in the sense of, for the very analytical people who maybe don't consider them spiritual or maybe resonate with more with agnostic, it's sciencey. So you can understand how the mind works, and he substantiates it all. But it also kind of indirectly is helping with spiritual evolution. And then in the second book, the volume two, he dives more into his own enlightenment journey. And it's interesting because when we talk about the word enlightenment, people get very triggered. That's only for Jesus. That's only for Buddha. Only a few select people attain that. It's a very taboo word, right? We all say I'm having a spiritual awakening because that's acceptable. But enlightenment is very like, oof, triggering. And so he speaks to his own, kind of enlightenment experience spontaneously. And the way it reads is kind of like a Kundalini awakening. But how he basically like had this understanding of how everything works. And it's interesting because what he describes, and I'll let you, I'll read it if you feel compelled, but what he describes was such a similar experience to several moments in my life. When I was much younger, I had a similar kind of mini, download of that similar kind of content or information. And then again, in the last year, under, the influence, or rather with the support of psilocybin, had a very similar kind of deep knowingness and integration of all of that. So, this is all happening, right? So this book, and I believe it was in that book, led me to read another book, which led me to read another book. So the book that I'm on that's really like bending my mind is called The Disappearance of the Universe. And so it is by, for those watching, it's Gary Renard, and it's very interesting. And this is a great conversation because it's just another step of our evolution of spiritual growth, right? So this book fell into my lap when I was ready to receive it. I had to do a lot of religious deconstruction to be able to even think about Jesus as someone that I wanted to like consider again. And I think there's a lot of people who might have also turned away from church or felt a certain way because of like the bastardization of our Bible and what it's been used for in the sense of control and fear and keeping people small and forgetting who we are. And so I had to really kind of deconstruct like who Jesus was, that like the teachings of Jesus or the teaching of these ascending masters are truly beautiful messages, but rather humans have come in and humanized them and made them what they're not. So, you and I have talked about this even in the last year about like, what does Jesus mean to you? Like, who is this person? Is he legit? Is this a concept? Like, what does that mean? Right. So, this book dives into a person who basically, essentially, through the support of these like beings that drop this. Now, this sounds weird for those who aren't ready. Please, like, just turn this off now because it might trigger you or sound like we've gone crazy. But basically, this gentleman who's a Christian is praying for spiritual growth. He wants to understand, these different things. He wants to grow and really dive into his knowing more. And so basically, these two beings that like kind of drop into physical form enter his life and begin to essentially provide him with the true, undoctrinated, undoctored teachings of Jesus. And it's beautiful. Well, it directs you to the book, The Course of Miracles. And A Course in Miracles was something I was exposed to about 5 years ago as well, was not ready for the content. So it sits on my shelf behind me. And it breaks down essentially this idea of transcending duality, understanding the illusions of the mind that have created what's before us today. And so I wanted to just set that foundation for our conversation today because it's important to understand kind of I think where this all has built to, because there's a lot of new age stuff out there about, well, we're ascending into the 5D, and there are people that are still stuck in the 3D. No, we're all here, we're all in our mind through the illusion, we are all here having an experience. And the true transcendence is being able to wake up from the dream. And that's a quote that he had that really started to bend my mind was, Jesus spoke a lot of like, we're learning to be in this world and not of this world. And that's something that I say a lot. It's like, I'm learning how to do that and like integrating how to do it right through education and then action. I'm trying to work on that. And the book speaks about how, a lot of us that are spiritually awake, and I'm doing that with air quotes, are awake within the dream. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely am. I know this is an illusion. I know it's a dream. I know none of it's real, but it is, and it doesn't matter, and it does. And yet, what Jesus was able to actually attain was being awake outside of the dream. So my mind, huh? I'm like, imagine the brakes going off on a car, like, "Arr!" And I'm like, what? How do we be awake outside of the dream, right? Similar to a dream you have at night, right? You wake up and you're like, "Oh, that was just a dream." It like that is what, we are, I think, moving towards, is learning how to be awake outside of the dream. So again, context in place here so we can kind of begin a dialogue here. I wanted to just set that foundation. So Jess, let's jump into some conversation about this because I talk a lot about this. We riff on ideas about what we're learning, where we're at. And I think it's so cool because the relationship you and I have is so synergistic, and that we're each like evolving and learning things that is so powerful to, each other's journey and growth, and also challenging the ways of being that we've held, including our own BS stories. So I want to pass it over if there's anything you want to interject, because I've been talking for a minute. But again, this is such a fun conversation.
Well, what I think is really cool is that you and I can have these very deep conversations. I don't even know if I call it confusing, but they're deep. And they start to twist over this way and twist over that way. And sometimes we're like, okay, maybe I'm more confused now than I was when I entered in. It's fine though. We're growing. But we can also be really human. And I think that's the whole concept of our beingness here, is that there's maybe just got to be more acceptance around the fact that we're on a journey. We're in a journey. And it is a journey, I believe, very deeply of remembrance. I grew up, I've read the Bible. I've gone to Bible studies. I've done a lot with that. And then I stepped out of it. I found there was things within the church that felt very judgmental. It felt contradictory to what I thought this was about. And so I took myself out of it. It didn't resonate. And in fact, a lot of the Old Testament doesn't resonate with me. God felt jealous and a little bit like manipulative.
Mhm.
It felt cruel and cold. The New Testament speaks to Jesus. And I'm talking about this because, you're bringing up A Course in Miracles and some of these really great readings out there that you do have to be a little bit down the road on the journey, because it's hard to unlock your mind to go there. I was there. My attachment to the church's reasoning prevented me from being able to think about who I am in this creation. I'm not just some filthy sinner that, is just groveling for salvation. I just don't, that doesn't resonate with any bone in my body. I can't look at my children and think, you dirty sinner. Like that doesn't resonate. But it took me a while to get unstuck from the guilt of that I was going against this thing. I was supposed to remain small and insignificant. And the church talks about humility, but they totally misconstrue what humility is. And it took me a while to get there. But on that journey, like you, I've read a lot of books. I really love Carl Jung, the Red Book. It's his writings. Jung and Freud were a team, and then they kind of separated. And Jung is kind of known as the father of modern psychology, because it embraces this spiritual side to the psyche. And he goes on some pretty incredible journeys in meditation where he is meeting the darkness within himself with the light. And he's doing this inside of him. It's inside of him, which brings it back to your original point, is that this is all, from what we believe, a manifestation within our own dream. And then it gets like, well, but your dream and my dream, I see your dream, you see my dream. Yes. I mean, we're all one, we're all connected to the same source. And in my readings, I know many years ago, I started to really think outside of the biblical box. And it brought me to the Apocrypha. And these are all the uncanonized books of the Bible. Talk about like blowing your mind. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there, they're going to say, well, they were unfounded, they were this, they were that, that's why they weren't canonized, they were removed. I don't care. I just want to tell people, I don't care. I don't follow what man has decided to interpret for me. I let my mind and my intuition and my heart kind of lead me on that. And boy, when it led me on that, it blew the top off. And then I found myself in the Nag Hammadi, going back to the Gnostic stuff, and how, they were talking about Jesus way before Jesus's existence and who he was. But then, after he was here, there's gospels out there, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. These are very spiritual gospels where she is sharing insights that Jesus shared with her. And they were very spiritual. It was about what is inside of us. It's not external of us. And these books were taken out. I think it was all with intention, but I also don't believe it was I don't think that these things were taken out to necessarily harm us. I believe they were taken out so we could find them. And I think it is a part of the journey. It's like the escape room. It's like the clues along the way. The goal is to get out of the room, but you have to become an investigator. You've got to learn how to speak differently because your words have meaning. You've got to learn how to get into the decoding of your own mind, realizing, being the observer of what's happening to me right now. And that is the whole story to me. That is the whole story. And maybe it's just my story. I mean, that's where things can get really spirally, because this just could be my dream. And, see how many people I can get involved in it. I don't know. But to me, that feels the most sensible. And it's not new age. And I think there is a very big distinction now between the new age, which is different than this very old age. We've just forgotten. In my opinion, we've forgotten with intention. We wanted to experience what was here. This is
Mhm.
a beautiful place, and there's a lot to experience, but we get all of it in that experience. And part of the experience is reawakening. It's coming back to what is internal, intrinsically within us. And then, like you said yesterday, then we can get through the harder moments in life, which you and I have had plenty. I've had a lot as of recent. It's incredible. It's amazing. But within that, then the story continues to evolve you. And it's like, okay, are you going to be of it? Or are you going to step out from it, observe it, and put it where it belongs and transcend it?
Mhm.
And that's this whole thing. That's where we're at.
Yeah, and that's you do such a beautiful job explaining, these things and also your evolution. And that's the thing is no two people, right? Even though we are all, we could go super high level, we are all connected, the one. There is no difference between you, me, and your neighbor. We are all interconnected. And within that, we are all reflecting out and experiencing different experiences of our evolution, and that this the holographic universe, right? Like your experience is reflecting out a portion of the population or of the totality. Mine is as well, and it's all, again, all a part of that continued evolution. And the remembrance is really the remembrance of the construction of the ego, which is not who we are. The ego is this thing that wants us to believe we're separate, wants us to believe we're inferior, superior, different, whatever. And that's what you and I see, we talk about it's hard to see on social media. My ego is making it feel hard, right? Angie's ego is like it's hard to see, rather than the allowance of just letting it be what it is. But I see the suffering as a result. And that's what, the part of me that's very human is sad about, right? I'm like, oh, I don't want to see people suffering. And that's their experience for their evolution, right? Like that's all that this is like experience to evolve, to remember. And, as I was reading this book, again, if you're ready for this content, man, this book is phenomenal. It's again mind bending. I have to slow down and really like take things in, but it's deconstructing my even recent beliefs, the beliefs I've held in the last 6 months. I'm like, ooh, time to reconfigure. But that's the meta awareness. So when I speak about the power of cultivating meta awareness, it's for the purpose of continually challenging every single belief you have, because the beliefs I had 5 years ago are nowhere close to what I feel I know now. And that's that just consistent, like, all right, challenge yourself, grow. challenge yourself, grow. And as you said, following your intuition, because everyone's journey is going to be different. My intuition, a few years ago was like the Bible and all this stuff's a bunch of garbage. I don't like it. It doesn't resonate for me. And now I'm like, oh, no, no, there's a lot of phenomenal teachings that when we pare down, again, outside of the Bible, when we pare down what Jesus truly speaks about, that is it. That's truth for me. It's not under the guise of this like religion umbrella. I think of the analogy of you're either a fish in a fishbowl, which is religion. You're kind of stuck in this little area you can't quite get out, but you can see that there's something bigger out there, but you can't yet experience it. Or you're the fish in the ocean who's like, oh my gosh, wow, there's all this stuff to explore. There's so many things to see and do and whatever. So, and in that, you're going to encounter new and bigger challenges in the ocean than you are in a tiny little fish tank where you're protected and you're limited and you're small. So, and you can become much bigger in the ocean than you can in the tiny little fishbowl. So we expand our capacity to learn, to grow, to understand on a different level, but also understand, like really embody this. So as I was reading this book, I had mentioned how they spoke of like the true enlightenment experience is to be awake outside of the dream. And that is why Jesus, as he was being nailed to the cross and tormented, could look at the people that were hurting them and say, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Essentially, I forget the quote, but it's, essentially that, like, forgive them, for they not know what they do. They don't realize, like, they're lacking in love. They don't realize we're all connected. They don't realize this is an illusion. They don't realize, all these things. And he's like, I see them, essentially for these innocent children that they are. They don't know, they forgot. And that's where we see war happening. People have forgotten, we see strife. It's like, well, we've just forgotten who we are, that we're all in this together. We're all connected. We're all of source, of God. So as I was reading that quote about, being awake outside the dream, I that night in meditation, I just prayed. I was like, all right, I'm ready. Like, how do I get to that next level of like full surrender, full transcendence of all of this? I'm ready to be outside the dream. I am wide awake in the dream. I know what's happening. I understand it. How do I get to that next level? And so as I'm in there in meditation, I got hit with the most profound sense of deep fear. And this voice said loudly to me, then be prepared to lose your children. And I immediately knew that meant they will die. You ready? You ready to do this, Ange? Go ahead, do it. And your kids are going to die. What is the most terrifying thing for a parent or a person with children to ever be faced with? The mortality of their kids. Take me, I don't care. Like, that's fine. I can leave this planet whenever it's my time. My children, though, I mean, that is a big attachment I have. And I'm cool saying that. I am not Buddha yet. I am not so like ascended that I can be like, it's all neutral, everything's fine. So I had this overwhelming amount of fear sweep through me because that was so real. So like, all right, you're ready. You want to truly experience detachment, then you will pay the ultimate price. Immediately, I was like, no, I don't want that. Nope, fine. I'll stay here. I'll stay awake in the dream. I don't care. Like, you cannot take my children. I am not ready for that. No. And it was just like this, I mean, bone chilling fear. And what I would imagine people speak to when they have like a very bad, like, medicine journey trip. That's how I felt in meditation. Like, I don't want this. This is not what I want. So as I, spent the whole night, like, just shook by this experience, I was just like, wow, that's like the ultimate ability to transcend, is to say, I am unattached to anything that could happen, so much that I'm willing to realize who I am. And that may mean things around me dissolve. Right. So as I wake up the next morning and I'm still just like, holy shit, trying to digest all of this, I'm like, oh my God, that was my ego. That was my ego. The one thing we all have that will fight to its death to preserve its integrity because it so badly wants to think it's special and it's individualized and the world's about it. The ego will do anything it can for self preservation. So the second I was like, Spirit Angie was like, we're ready, ego's like, no, 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 no. They're going to take your kids. They're going to kill them. Don't do that. They're going to die. And again, how would Angie's soul self knows it's all fine? Angie's ego knows the one way to keep me stuck, truly stuck, is to threaten the well being of my children. And I'm like, oh, what a trick of the mind. Like, that is how insidious the mind is. in the sense of wanting, or rather the ego, to keep you the same, right? My ego can handle little changes here and there. We've done enough of that over the last 5, 6 years, so it knows we can handle little changes. But when I threaten its full existence, it pulls out the stops. And so I felt kind of proud. I was like, oh, I figured that out. Not going to trick me. But, but still, it was just like, oh my goodness. And so, fortunately, a day after that, I was meeting, I had a networking event, and there's another woman who studies the Course in Miracles book. And I told her about what happened. And we just had this very beautiful exchange. And she similarly had something happen with her own meditation about her family. And I was like, wow, that is just how much the brain, the ego, wants to believe in its truth here, which is why when Jesus was on the cross dying, he's like, I'm not dying. I'm leaving this illusion that you guys are a part of. I'm not. I'm just going to, back to the energy side or whatever, happens. And so again, I think of it and I just like chuckle because I'm like, now that I'm not so full in the emotion of it, I'm like, wow, that was a really good deception of the mind. And that is what all of us are tripping through every single day when we think, you know, oh my God, if I don't make enough money, I'm going to die. Oh my God, if I don't make enough this, I'm going to have this happen. Oh my God, if people laugh at me, it means I'm going to be banished from, my family. And we have all these like constant triggers to our ego constantly. Our ego is just desperately looking for any threat around it because it wants to preserve itself. But the reality is, like, we're not the ego. Like, our true spirit self is of God, and that's where you speak to going inward. Like, that is the truth, and that was one of the biggest lessons I've had that's bonked me over the head the last 2 years, specifically with my health journey. I've paid tens of thousands of dollars for people to help me try to, like, figure out this autoimmune stuff and heal and whatever, and the biggest knock I got was over a year ago where I heard loudly in meditation, "You need to be silent. Shut up. Stop it. Like, you're looking out there for all these answers when you have to go inward." And as I did, my body started to heal. As I did, I started to like just have little hints of different things that my body would benefit from that no practitioner would have told me because it was such a strain, like wouldn't have made sense to anybody to like look for these things. And so, I see clients as well. It's so interesting how, the people we encounter are reflections of our own journey. And I have a lot of clients who are on their own path of the same thing, desperately seeking the external, including working with me to heal something inside. And I keep having to bring them back to, you've got to go inward. Nobody can do this for you. But people have said that to me for years. And so it's like it takes that repetition of continuing to hear the same message for it to finally sink, which is why the spiritual journey, it's not linear. You're going to hear things. I've heard a lot of the things I've read in these books over the years, and it didn't hit like it did now because I wasn't ready to receive it. I wasn't at that point. And so within that, it's like we have that compassion for those around us who are going through it too, because it's like we're all just doing the best we can on this journey. And, that also trips into even just forgiveness, right? When we can like do the work on loving ourselves and really understanding like the true innocence of us as souls, right? Like who chose the ego, right? That's almost like the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge. Like we bit that apple metaphorically to gain this knowledge, which really was this separation, this illusion of ego. It's like we can see that innocence in everybody else too. Like there are these sweet little parts of our souls just navigating it as well. And they're on this journey of their own. And, eventually the goal is all of us reach enlightenment and remember, like truly remember and integrate that knowledge. And, I don't know if that's this lifetime for me. That'd be cool if it was. But, it's also like, well, but I'll do it until I don't need to, until I've figured it out. And that's that idea of reincarnation, right? Like reincarnation is not this punishment for, your terrible sins over the years, but it's to continue your soul's evolution until you are of Christ consciousness and you remember. And again, some of this might be really triggering for people. I'm just thinking like those that are
Mhm.
maybe not at this point, this might be really, really triggering. And if it doesn't resonate, that's okay. That's okay. Like your journey is going to be unique to you. But we're all just here to do this work and people are a reflection of us, right? So the people that really anger us, they're a reflection of what we have to heal within ourselves. The areas of, our life, you and I talk about finances, right? We've both had struggles with money mindset and scarcity, just that deep root chakra stuff. And external circumstances reflect what's inside here. So it's like the more we kind of work on it, surrender it, tap into the true truth of the abundance of our birthright as fractals of God, like, then it's like, "All right, well, whatever. Okay, car broke down. It's fine. The money will be there to fix it." And when you're in that energy of surrender, that's also the energy of abundance. So, again, there's so much to talk about within this, but I wanna just give you an opportunity to, again, continue the dialogue because I know you have so many beautiful things to weigh in on here, so
Well, I think you covered it. I think that, we can talk about the ego as being kind of that intrusive thought. It's us standing on the cliff's edge and like the void calling and saying, just jump. I think in a way that's like a thought like that could be our highest selves. Knowing that everything, if we really just erase all of this experience, we know that we just go back to source. This is a journey. We could end it. I think our highest selves knows that. It's insignificant in a sense. But then the ego comes in, it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Right. And it starts to tell this whole story. Like you really can't do that. Just think about the consequences of that. What if you don't even die? Right. Like there's all this stuff. And, as you were telling me about your meditation in the ego, I've had so many moments of that over the years during, I guess you could just call it my awakening, where you start to get to that state, that flow state where you're really in your essence. And all of a sudden, it's kind of like, oh, everything, no, it doesn't really matter. Like nothing really matters. And then all of a sudden, here comes the ego, like, do, you know what? I'm going to take your kids then. How about if I burn down your house or whatever it is? And you're right. Like it freezes you. I have all those intrusive, horrible ideas pop into my head like you did. It's the ego just saying, don't you step out of line because you will be in danger or everyone will be in danger. We are the most narcissistic captors to ourselves that you could ever imagine. And I think the stage of life I'm in right now, I'm having that tested quite a lot. Everything around me is showing how fragile it is and how quickly it can go. And I have been very triggered by it, very triggered because, it feels like everything is kind of hanging by this little thread. And then there's times when I'm like, haha, I know what the message is, just like you. It's like, how attached are you? What if it went away? You know? My first stage of that game was my family, losing my not to death, just in uh complete detachment. My parents, my brother, family, and it's they didn't die, they're still alive, and so it makes it even harder to grieve that. That was my first stage of, are you going to be able to let go of that? Let me tell you, that one's a hard one to let go of. It has been a very slow couple year process of learning how to detach from it, but I am seeing the lesson in it. And again, it's not for my detriment. It's okay. It's showing that it was for my benefit, but man, it's still so hard. So, this is what that journey looks like. This is what being awake in the dream feels like. It feels like discomfort, but knowing. So that I think that's part of the discomfort is I see what's happening, but it does not feel good. And and so I sit here and I think about, after you said that, what would it feel like to be outside of the dream and be awake? What is that? I don't know. I don't know. I am definitely awake inside the dream, but it's very clear to me this is part of my soul's evolution because it has not undone me, it has built me. And so I know that this is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing. It has not undone me. It has built me. And I had dreams when I was in my 20s about this, which blows my mind still. And it was a solo walk towards light. And that's all it was. And it was light and frequency. And I was going the opposite direction of everybody else I knew. And I couldn't figure out what that meant back in the early 2000s. But I think now, being 45 years old and have had these dreams periodically over the years, and then my experience in life, it's like it was showing me that this is how it was going to look. I'm going to be moving towards clarity, understanding, awakening maybe, but I was going to do it
Mhm.
alone in a sense. And then over the course of time, my dreams showed me that there were others, very few others, and people that I recognized and things like that. But I think that is why we're here, and we can't skip the steps. This journey is not one where, we get to hop over a lesson or bypass. We just don't. And some of us are going to be dealt really tough cards. Some of us will be dealt different cards than that, but it's all perspective. It's
Yes, and
all
that's
perspective.
it is, and it's such a good point too. I just want to acknowledge. I think that the people listening will understand this. We're not speaking to spiritually bypassing anything, meaning if you're in an abusive relationship, we're not telling you to just shift your attention, be the bigger person, and offer forgiveness. No, of course you need to take care of your human vessel while you're here, and that means, keeping yourself safe. And then from a distance, maybe offering love or forgiveness, right? But to not stay in situations that are harmful for you,
Right.
because then you're just being a martyr. Like, there's no sense in that. That's not gonna help you evolve or grow. Um, but it is being able to, as you said, look at the situations unfolding, and some of it does happen to break you down so much because, again, there's a point where and that was kind of my journey, in the last few years was like my health kept deteriorating more and more and more. And that was the breaking down of me and my ego and also my resolve to try to man through it. That masculine energy of push through, I gotta fix this and heal it and whatever.
Yeah.
All it was doing was pushing me to the point of where I'd finally just fricking surrender already,
Right.
and that's what it was doing for me was that breaking down of all these ego constructs to force me, and not force me, I chose, but to, like, get me to the point where my soul was like, "Okay, now she'll pay attention. Cool. Like, yeah, now we got her. She's listening. Sweet. Okay, next time, Ange, you could do this a little gentler. You don't have to
Mhm.
do it hard." But it was for a purpose, and that is, I think what I wanna challenge anybody to is if you're in a state of fear, and we're not immune, like, we are still on our journey, so everything we're speaking of, we are actively implementing ourselves. But if you're in a state of fear, it's not real. It is literally the acronym is kind of at this point just a little cliche, but it's false evidence appearing real. But it's an illusion of the ego. That's it. So if you feel, like you're being threatened by certain circumstances, your job is to really stand back and assess it and then figure out what the high path is for you to move through it. And then, begin to evolve through that capacity, and all the things happening are just here, and as you said, steps in a process. You and I was laughing because about a year ago I kept getting slammed with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the angel numbers or synchronistic numbers mean steps in a process, like, and you're on the steps in the process, you can't skip it. And then every once in a while I'd see 4, 5, 6. I'm like, yes, I made it, right? I made it. I'm evolving. And then, now I'm back to 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, hey, there's a breakdown and a rebuild of everything that's happening right now, and that's okay. Um, and the other numbers I've seen, so if you're not someone who sees repetitive numbers, pay attention because we also receive signs from our soul self, God, whatever you believe, of just nudges like, hey, you're on the right path. Hey, pay attention over here. Hey, some changes are coming, but that's okay. And they're never frightening messages. Like, if something again is of fear, it is not of God. And so I've seen for a long time 144, which, if those of you who read the Bible speaks, I forget, I don't know where it was, Revelations or whatever, about 144,000 people will be saved. Now, I don't believe that for one hot second. I think what it's speaking to is people reaching enlightenment. Like, as you said, it's the lonely path of going this way, right? Versus the crowds kind of staying this way. And so I think it's a metaphor again for the small number of people who are currently at any point in time on that path of evolution, because mind you, we are all on different trajectories, right? There might be people who this is one of their first rodeos on planet Earth and they're just like really hardcore into the ego because they like God is not anything of their memory, and that's okay. And then there's, others who maybe are, again, that's to assume the soul is a separate self, but maybe others who are a little further along. And so I continually see 144, and I don't mean that to be, "Hey, Angie, you're one of the chosen ones." It's, "Hey, you're on the path. You're doing the work. This is what you're doing right now." And not everybody's gonna come with you, and that's the part of this that is interesting is, you and I educate through these dialogues we're having. And I think, whether you wanna call it education or just talk about our journey, right? It's gonna resonate for those that will, but you and I are not going to engage on social media in an argument for someone who wants desperately to stick into their ego and prove their victimhood. I'm not going to, because you're still at a point where that's very important to you and you're desperately defending that. So the more a person engages in a conversation that tries to break down the ego, the more the ego sticks their little feet in the ground. And that's just like why you can't talk politics with some people, right? Is people are it's an attack on the self. And when that happens, people go into fight flight, they don't respond, they can't think outside of the box. And so, if anything, if what we're saying, in any way resonates with your soul, the best way to begin this journey or to continue it is to constantly be working on your meta awareness, challenging all the thoughts you have and be willing to be wrong, because it's not a testament of you as a person. The ego wants it to be like, oh, you messed up. Here you go. You're wrong again. No, you're learning. You are this beautiful soul who's remembering. And part of remembering is experiential, and it's following your intuition and it's tuning into that inner voice and slowing down. And that's what, I've been really forced to, even in the last month, the, God, universe, myself is like, be like, bitch, you need to stop. Like you're doing
Mhm.
too much. You're looking outside of yourself to keep your head above water when like the real message here is to stop, surrender, to meditate, pray, to be more, to do more of those, walks in nature, whatever it is, because my default is very much in the masculine energy of grind and go. And that's what I grew up experiencing. I grew up with a lot of um anxious energy around survival, right? Like the ego is so terrified of dying from a very little age because of all that I was exposed to. And I'm still unconditioning that. That's my default, which is why I've had all the autoimmune issues I've had. I'm the poster child for freaking autoimmune with trauma, chronic stress, the go, go, go lifestyle. Like it all makes sense. And that doesn't have to be my reality if I don't continue to choose that way. So it's also that compassion for self. And I think that's where it all starts. The first I had sent Jess a voice memo this weekend, and it was beautiful and long and it didn't go through. And I was like, I don't have the energy to re-record it, so she'll hear it now. But it was about, that forgiveness of others starts with the forgiveness of self, and that deep compassion and love for ourselves. And I look around at all of the actions I've done over the years, and so many of them were out of just disdain and anger for myself and just a lack of compassion. And that's shifting, into like, okay, I can't forgive those around me or love those around me unconditionally until I can do that myself. And that's not selfish. That's that healing work of remembering who we are. So, if you see other relationships around you that are in strife and you're struggling with forgiveness, you're struggling with compassion, know that you have to do that first. You have to have that within you first to give it. And that is the Gandhi, phrase of be the change you want to see in this world. We will not have world peace until we have inner peace. Bottom line. People are going to say, well, I'm not in control of others. You're not. That's just it. You have to mirror that out. And then that echoes out to the totality, but it has to start within first.
Yeah, yeah. Amen. I believe that this is probably one of the most important topics because we are all on the journey. We are. It's just whether or not you want to be and accept that you are. That's going to make the difference in your life. I would love to know if anybody wants to continue this conversation or you want to know more about something specific. Please feel free to comment. We'd love to read and learn from you guys and add that into our show if we possibly can.
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite episodes to record. This is such valuable, conversations. And again, it's if people are on the path or maybe at a different point, none of this is with shame. We're all on our own journey, but of the whole. So, if this doesn't resonate, that's okay. If it does, and you're like, oh, I'm beyond you, ladies, please let us know because I'd love to talk to you and like hear how you got there, right? Like we're all learning from each other, and this doesn't happen in a vacuum. My growth would not be where it is if I didn't have you in my life talking to me and like bouncing these ideas off of, right? And so it is that community. I think that's so valuable to help all of us evolve, and it's going to happen at different paces. And again, none of it's meant with any sense of shame or a shame. You shouldn't be ashamed of where you are. And if you don't, spirituality is not your jam, that's okay. It may not be right now
Right?
or this lifetime or ever,
And
for a
that's
long time.
okay.
That's okay. There's no shame.
And that's
So,
okay.
again, thank you for tuning in. Would love to hear feedback on this episode, what you thought, and then we'll continue the dialogue, I'm certain. So, have an awesome rest of your day, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.